So we'll get the team back together. So we're just waiting for Rick, are we?
Yes.
Is he on the phone?
We might as well start.
Ironical, says Michael. Right. Tell him to tell her he'll call back. We'll be fine. Okay, so I think in the interest of that last round of questions, it's probably worth getting Andrew and Andy to the table to discuss aspects of the concession deed, flows, etc. So I'll hand over to you guys. Hopefully Councillor Barker will arrive when he does. So.
Thanks, Chairman. So there are a number of flows involved here, some of which are required by the conditions of the consents, and some which are in the draft concession deed. So if I start at the beginning with the biggest amount, so the conditions require a minimum flow from the dam, and if you add that up over the course of the year, that's around 45 million cubic metres of water that has to be released out of the dam to maintain a minimum flow in the river. There's another...
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify that, when you say guarantee the minimum flow, you're not speaking of the minimum flows at the like at the Red Bridge and so forth. What minimum flow are you referring to?
So if I was about to carry on to address that point, Councillor Belford, so that is the minimum flow which must be released at the bottom of the dam. It's 1.23 cubic metres per second. That's the minimum flow which must be maintained at all times at the base of the dam. Even if the inflow to the dam is lower than that, the dam must release stored water so that the minimum flow at the foot of the dam is maintained at that level. It's the 99th percentile of the 7-day mean annual low flow. That is how it is set. That is a specific condition of the RWSS. There are additional conditions, specific conditions, that require the dam to release water to maintain minimum flows at 2% above the minimum flows at RDS and the other measuring station on the Tuki and the Waipawa themselves. And those releases are so that farmers... It's one of the measuring stations on the Waipawa, I think. Yeah. So there's two measuring stations, one on the Waipawa and one on the Tuki at around about State Highway 2. There are statutory minimum flows set at those two measuring stations, and a number of people with consents, either to take out of the river or out of hydraulically connected groundwater, their consents are restricted so they can't take water below the minimum flow. The RWSS has to release water from the dam to maintain the flow at those two stations at 2% above the minimum flow, so that those users with earlier consents are not affected, or they're kept whole by the conditions of the RWSS. Otherwise, if the flow went lower, they would have to stop taking. Thirdly, there are the flushing flows, and again, these are specific conditions for of the RWSS consents. It's not 4 million cubic metres, it's actually 4 times 1 million cubic metres. 1 million cubic metres has to be released no less frequently than 30 days over a 5-month period. So those are the matters that are covered by the RWSS conditions. In the draft concession deed between the council and the RWSS, or the Rutana Water Limited Partnership, there has long been proposed an additional 4 million cubic metres of what are called HBRC flows. These are not the flushing flows, they are a separate set of flows. And as was explained earlier by Liz, the proposition has up until now been that a council would have the right to take those flows, but it must pay for those flows at the 23 cents per cubic metre, the base price, plus inflation, the same as a foundation water user. So I hope that's clarified what the various sets of flows that are being talked about.
From day one.
And
Yeah, and from day one of water delivery, if you choose to take it.
Okay, Councillor Scott.
Just like clarification, because we all know that those were the flows that would actually have to be purchased. Well, we should know. Is it guaranteed at that basic price, or does it get affected by the spot market? And what are the order of priorities in times of high demand when HBRC might most be wanting to utilise that type of environmental flow?
so I'll deal with the priorities, and Andrew will deal with the price issue. So the concession deed sets out a priority of sets of flows, and the first priority is for human safety, and the second priority is environmental flows. And the HBRC flows are included in the concession deed currently at that first priority.
So that's key. In addition to so the scheme around effectively curtails, if you want, the first tranche of water to be curtailed, which is really behind your question, Councillor Scott, is irrigation water, in a supply arrangement whereby the stored water can't supply at the rate contracted in the irrigation water, it curtails irrigation water. But in addition to that, if, for example, a scheme has sold spot water through the irrigation season and it's materially compromised as take-or-pay contracted water, it's effectively got a compensation regime around protecting the primary contracts. So it needs to manage the spot water issue, including it would. So that's how that works.
Okay. So there'll be further questions. Oh, Councillor Hewitt, I had a couple.
I'm just wondering, when those 4 times 1 million cumegs are released, who decides what time of the year they are released?
So that's set out by the conditions. I might not have this letter perfect, but it'll be close. So for the period from the 1st of December, I think it is, but it might be the 1st of November, the clock starts ticking for a 30-day countdown. And if the flow in the river hasn't reached a certain threshold during that period, then when 30 days has elapsed, 1 million cubic metres has to be released. And when it has been released, the clock starts counting down for another 30 days. So there's a 5-month period in which over which 4 1 million cubic metre flushing flows have to be let go. In addition to that, if you've gone more than, I don't know, I think it's 20 days, and then there's a small fresh in the river which wouldn't be big enough to reset the clock, you can release the 1 million cubic metres on top of that fresh, so you get more bang for your buck. Then the clock starts counting down again.
And I'll just elaborate. The logic of that time period is an accrual, what we call an accrual cycle around algal growth. So it's generally speaking, if you're in a low flow period without any freshers, algae accumulates over a 30-day period, more or less. So the time sequence is related to the physical effect as well.
And as to your question as to who decides, it is the operator of the RWSS, because they are the ones who have the condition and the consent.
Peter Bevan then.
Thanks, Chair. This is a really difficult paper for me because can we talk about these being the HBRC flows so we know what we're talking about, this 4 million cubic metres that we're talking about here? There's nothing in this paper that tells me that 4 million cubic metres is the right amount for environmental additional flows in the river. And it might actually be 8 million or it might be 12 million. There's no evidence that 4 million is the appropriate number. So my view about this is that why wouldn't we use the spare water that's going to be in the dam from its first year of filling to find out what the right number is and then contract that amount in 5 or 6 or 8 years' time or whatever, once we've established the appropriate amount, if in fact there is a need to do this.
I'll get Mr. Maxwell to talk a bit more about the environmental aspects of it. In terms of the timing of it, I mean, one of the advantages of this particular proposal is that council would effectively, would be a foundation water user agreement and would have the benefits that actually go with that, and that in addition to that, council would get up to year 10 of water at no cost in any event. After that time, council could decide it would like to purchase more water. It could decide it doesn't need as much water. It could effectively, join the market for water availability. But we haven't gone into any significant or any detailed analysis of the environmental benefits and tried to quantify the amount yet until we have some assessment from council or some direction from council about whether or not you're even interested in this particular proposal. But I'll ask Ian just to outline a bit more work that the staff have done around some different levels of water amount.
Sure, and perhaps just starting with, just to make the distinction between the flows that Dr. Pearce indicated are conditioned into the consent, the 4 times 1 million cubic metres. As I'm sure you'll understand, the evidence around that was considered by a range of experts involved in the process, and there was no contest that 4 times 1 million cubic metres of water wasn't going to provide some benefit. In fact, if anything, there might have been some contest that some more water would be beneficial for those flushing flows. So in terms of setting the right quantum for those flushing flows, there's a good evidential base for that traversed the Board of Inquiry process, and hence the board was satisfied to put those conditions in the consent. Then moving back out to the additional benefits that might accrue from more water, as Liz has mentioned, we haven't been able to go in the time we've had to quantify that. The view of the ecologist is that it's a no-brainer, that there are absolutely benefits that would accrue by having more water available to either increase the number of flushing flows throughout the year or distribute the water in places where there may be temperature issues, or in time if the dam infrastructure allows to get water through Lake Hartuma to deal with water quality issues that lake experiences annually. All of those things become possible, and they all provide environmental, ecological benefits, but it's just we haven't been able to go in and quantify the detail of the when and the where and the hows.
That's, if I can follow up, that's precisely my point. You don't know whether 4 million is the right number or not. So given that there's all this spare water that we're going to have in the first, let's say, 10 years of the scheme, why wouldn't we use the opportunity to find out what the right number is by doing some trialling on flushing flows and environmental flows and so forth, and enter into a contract once we know, rather than say, well, it's 4 million and be stuck with the wrong number?
Describe contract to me.
No, that's not where I was going to go, Chairman. So the proposition that you have in front of you is that you have 30 million cubic metres over 10 years. You can take it however you like, so you can do whatever experimentation you want to do with that 30 million cubic metres, and your proposition about experimentation in that sense is sensible.
Councillor Belford.
I guess I'm coming from the same direction as Councillor Bevan, in that it seems to me somewhat belatedly the staff has come up with a high-level assessment of actual environmental benefits to this project, but it can't price them, it can't tell us how much we need, and so it seems to me we have, as usual, the cart before the horse here, don't we? That we're being asked to agree to some financial terms of a deal whose benefits are still left rather murky, and seems to me it's premature for us to even be considering this until we see more precision as to what actually are the opportunities with this water and how much might be required.
So,
Could
councillor,
staff
maybe it
elaborate
is
a bit
opportune to talk about the financial aspects of the deal. So, under the current arrangement, under the concession deed agreement, this council has to start paying for whatever water it chooses to dial up for environmental enhancement purposes from day one of the water flowing from the dam. So, yeah, let's talk about another or spend none and not take advantage of that spare capacity to undertake further environmental benefits, which was certainly, as I outlined at the start, was a key component of both the rationale for the dam. It's been the rationale for some alternative proposals, as you will be aware, Councillor, about purely having dams for environmental benefits. So clearly, environmental benefits are foremost in most people's minds around, what can further enhance the viability of this particular scheme. So what we've got at the moment is a concession deed agreement where we have to start paying from or not, either no water or we start paying. Council starts paying from the time that the dam starts flowing. And as I said, until we know how much was needed, we don't know how much to budget for. Under this particular proposal, essentially what happens is that we're not spending ratepayer money. We're getting 30 million cubic metres over from years 4 to 10 at no cost. And after that, we're actually just foregoing some of the financial income in favour of a dividend to the environment. If we choose to carry on and continue paying for some additional flow after year 10, it comes at a point when we have positive cash flow back from the scheme, and as I said, we forego some of that in dollar terms, and instead we put that down the river.
To follow up to your characterization of that, nevertheless, by entering a water user agreement, we are changing this from a optional expenditure on our part, which we may never make, to a $23 million expenditure, which we must make, correct?
No, again, no, because up until year 10 there is no cost, and at the end of that time you can choose what you want, whether or not you want to retain the water.
No. You're asking us to sign a water user agreement that commits us to spend in the latter part of the term of this agreement, the last 15 years of it, we must buy basically 100 million cubic meters of water at 23 cents. We're obliged to buy that water, use it or not, as every other signer of a water user agreement, if we enter this water user agreement. It's $23 million.
Or council could choose not to retain ownership of that water.
Meaning we could on-sell it.
Correct.
But we still have a financial obligation one way or the other. We have to, even if we buy it and resell
Not if you don't own
we
it.
still have to buy the water, correct?
Not if you don't own it.
Yeah, but then you're asking us to take a risk on the water with ratepayers' money. You're saying, so we can sell it, so we're taking a speculative risk this water's worth money in the 10-year period. It's a contingency liability and a contingent risk in our balance sheet.
Yeah, through Mr. Chairman, yes, there is a risk. Of course there is. You are being asked to make a commitment at year 10 to purchase 4 million cubic metres of water. You can on-sell it if you don't want to use it, if you don't want to use it for environmental flows. But the fallback position here is you are taking a risk. You have a financial outlay if you don't on-sell. The cash flows will be looked at by the peer review done by Deloitte, and that will be brought back to you. And at that time, you'll know what cash flows are coming from the Rua Taniwha through HBRC back to council, and you'll be in a better position to know the extent of that outlay and how you can afford it. Councillor Barker,
I've got two questions.
Oh, supplementary then.
Can you please clarify, Dr. Pearce, what are we talking about here? If we're looking at a 6% return, what will the difference be, very roughly?
Thanks, Councillor Hewitt. So the cash flows from to HBRC from the RWSS are quite variable because at different times the whole project will be re-geared, is the phrase. It means it borrows some money and it uses some of that to distribute back to the investors. So those numbers are quite lumpy year to year, and we quite deliberately, and they're somewhat confidential because they're still tied up in negotiations. But in the period up to 2033, the smallest number that HBRC receives in there is in the order of 3.5 million. And the largest number is much larger than that. I'm not going to tell you what it is. The cost to HBRC to pay for these flows, because it does inflate over the course of that, over the period of time, as any water user agreement does. It starts at about 1.3 million and it goes up to about 1.5 million per annum. So, there's at least $2 million of net cash flow in any one of those years. At the lowest possible level, it's multiple millions of dollars in most years, and it's substantially greater than that in a year when there is regearing.
Councillor Barker.
I've got two questions. I've got several. The first two questions I've got is that I would to Dr. Pearce is why wasn't this type of proposal put to the council at the time that all the conceptual work was being done on the dam? I mean, we're looking at this on the sort of the eve of it now, so I'm just wondering why it didn't come up as a thought process earlier. And my second question is to Paul, and what I want to know from him is, being the person managing the finances, what is the total liability to this council for the cost of that water as your estimate? So we've got 4 million cubic metres times so many years, and then there'll be an inflation index. So what is the total amount if everything goes wrong, no water's sold? What is the total potential liability that you think would be on the council's balance sheet for that?
So you want me to go first? So with the benefit of hindsight, and you have already been briefed in private on this matter, Councillor Barker, the concept of the HBRC flows was derived some years ago as part of developing a concession deed. It seemed like a really good idea at the time. This now seems like a better idea for all of the parties. It prevents the council from being in a position where it has a right which it's relatively unlikely to use. And from the RWSS perspective, having to reserve 4 million cubic metres that might never be used out of the 104 million cubic metres of flows, and because there is a right to take it, that has a significant financial impact or an economic impact for the RWSS. So it seemed over the last few months that it was sensible to propose an alternative to those two unfortunate outcomes of what seemed like a good idea at the time.
Question?
Sorry, I'm waiting for my answer to my second question.
I've got a supplementary there.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I mean, this, I don't have all the figures in front of me. I think you realise I don't. But look, my comment is today, if you pick this up today for 4 million at 23 cents, you'd be paying 920,000. Dr. Pearce has kindly given us an indication of it, year 10, what that would be with 23 cents by CPI, which is calculations that HBRC have obviously worked through, something in the order of 1.3 to 1.5. So in 10 years' time, when that's picked up, it would appear as though with the low inflation, it'll move to about 1.3. My understanding of this is that you get 6 years free water, and then it's a 35-year contract, 6 years free water, and then another 29 years paying. I think that's my understanding of it. So if you have another
25 years.
The 35-year consent is already started.
Yep. So that's
Right. Then that includes
Right, so it's
construction.
25. It's 25, yeah, okay.
25 years.
So there's 25. 25 at 1.3 million per annum, which would increase by the cost of living. So if you calculate out that, it's got to be over 30 mil plus. But I come back to the cash flows. What's missing here is the cash flows that are going to come from the Ruataniwha to HBRC as the shareholder and then back to council. Now, those cash flows are confidential at the moment, but Deloitte will be looking at those as part of their peer review, and they need to comment to you about those cash flows.
Just a
Could it
follow up there, sorry. But you keep talking about paying Mr. Drury. In fact, we're foregoing a financial return for an environmental water return. Surely it's as simple as that.
Yes, it is, and that's the decision today, isn't it? Are these flows going to make that difference from an environmental flow, and what is the value that you put on that?
Can I just say, that's not the way the question is. The question is that we are liable for, this is the back of an envelope calculation, 1.3 million plus inflation times 25 years. That's what we're being told here.
We get paid in water, that's what I'm saying.
But that's the cost to us. If we don't take the water, we're going to have to pay that. That's the money that's going to go. It's cash. What we get a benefit from it is the secondary. It's cash.
To clarify, it's not cash, as in not cash that has to be budgeted for by council. It's foregoing of dividend from RWLP. And what Mr. Drury has explained is that in order to satisfy you about that quantity, Deloitte will look at that as part of their due diligence, and that's reflected in the recommendation.
So if you, I just don't get this.
Councillor Scott, I had a hand up here for a while. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just come back to the value of this particular, if we shift it to something that is a water user agreement, and we actually have that water bought over that 35-year period, and accepting that the first 10 years we're not paying for it, should council, which will obviously be a very subsequent council to this one, decide it is not needed, is that an asset of value in its own right? And what can be done with it? I'd just like some clarity and understanding around that particular aspect of it.
Be an asset on the book.
So I can give you at least a partial answer to your question, Councillor Scott. So foundation water users are able to trade with other foundation water users. So if the council had this quantity of water and another foundation water user wanted to buy some more water, you would be able to trade and sell that water. There would be constraints on the price that you can extract from other foundation water users, because otherwise there'd be arbitrage between you and the limited partnership. In the sense that if the council, a future council, decided that it actually didn't want any of this water, it would certainly be able to enter into commercial negotiations, I'm sure, with the RWLP
Absolutely.
to sell it back to them.
Councillor Bevan.
The price that is appropriate on the day.
We've got water, you don't need it.
Order.
So what we're now hearing is with an inflation-adjusted cost, we're actually probably talking something like a $35 million commitment that you're asking us to make today. Can you explain to me how we can do that without going through some sort of a public consultation process?
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify a number, Mr. Maxwell just pointed out to me, on page 40 of this, HBRC have actually calculated that this cost. It's an estimate, obviously. 35-year, this is the second line down, 35-year cost of water to this council is 43 million. Is that, I'm quoting that right? Yeah. Okay. So that's the figure that I was searching for.
Is it my turn?
Mr. Chairman, I wasn't intending to answer your question. I thought the clarification of the number was useful.
Before I go to Councillor Belford, I have a follow-up question, not so much to that one, but this deal after financial close is off the table because you've got a whole lot of other parties in the picture. So we've been asked today to agree in principle to explore this further, but just so we're clear, after financial close, other parties will be involved in the discussion, and this deal as it sits today will be off the table.
First of all, the price will not necessarily be the same. Certainly can't be better. Foundation Water User Agreement explicitly says Foundation Water User Agreement parties get the best price. So you're not going to get a better price by waiting and negotiating. The second is you will be negotiating with the Ruataniwha Water Limited Partnership at that point, whereas you have some more control over this as a part of the concession deed now, or in exchange for the concession deed arrangements.
Okay. Councillor Bell.
So, back to Peter's question, which still needs to be answered. We have a $35 million or so liability, however you want to characterize it. How we finance it, whether it's foregone revenue or whatever, is irrelevant to the issue that we have a legal liability here of $35 million to meet somehow. We just had a previous discussion where we agonized over adding a couple of $1 million to water drilling.
Okay.
Needed to go to a long-term planning process. So how can we possibly commit whether we think there's environmental value in it or not? We might think there's $50 million of water to buy because the environmental values have been so clearly laid out to us. How can we do this without public consultation?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, the whole process around this particular project, the Ruataniwha Water Storage Scheme, has been through a number of iterations of public consultation. And while I accept that this particular proposal has not specifically been through that, one of the key drivers, in fact the key driver for this council, has always been around how further development in the Tukituk can meet both economic development goals, but as importantly, or even more importantly, environmental benefits. And the council has always worked towards that particular outcome. What's being proposed here today, proposal put before you by HBRC, has been around a different way of getting that environmental benefit to that which is currently in the concession deed agreement.
We still don't have an answer. I mean, this is not a minor footnote. This is taking an $80 million commitment and making it a $115 million commitment. And you're trying to tell me that the public doesn't have a say in that?
So the $80 million commitment is around capital investment. So that's quite separate. This is not adding to that at all.
It has to go on our balance sheet. It has to go on our balance sheet. Therefore, it is.
You have an asset as well as a potential liability.
Can I ask the question?
That's what Dr. Pearce has highlighted, that by purchasing water, becoming a Foundation Water User Council, has an asset on its books that offsets the liability, if that's what Deloitte's indicates to you, and you've got that to satisfy you.
Another bite at the cherry later on. Councillor Barker.
Recommendation 1 that you've signed off on here, Liz, said Council agrees that the decisions we made are not significant under the criteria contained in the Council's, etc., etc., etc. Can you explain to me how a $35 million liability, that's what it is not significant?
like I said before, Councillor, it's part of the process of further refining Council's overall investment in the environment. And this has been a part of the Ruataniwha water storage package from the time that it was first proposed, not specifically this $35 million, but an intent by Council to invest its own funds through the concession deed agreement in an environmental enhancement. This is simply an alternative way of doing that provides both greater environmental benefits than is outlined in the concession deed agreement, and therefore means, and also means that there is no outlay to the council, unlike the current concession deed agreement, because it will be, any payments will be offset by the positive cash flow returns.
Could you point to me any other activity that the council could undertake where it forewent $35 million of potential revenue for which it did not have to go to its community to explain that it was foregoing $35 million worth of revenue? Put aside the benefits, what other activity could we forego $35 million? Say we decided to forego $35 million worth of rates because there was an environmental benefit. Would we not have to go to the community about that? Yes, we would.
Report dividends. How would we do it?
Further questions?
Well, no answer.
Thank you.
I asked a question and I haven't got an answer. Sorry?
I can't think of any.
Can't think of any. Okay.
Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you. I hear all along that there is value to environmental flows, and so can you please clarify if this goes to Deloitte's so that we can get more information and quantify this, because it is confusing. Then do we get another crack at debating it and saying yes or no? I mean, is this just asking for the permission to go to Deloitte's?
It's an agreement in principle. If you go to recommendation 3, that's the way I read it.
I want to hear from Liz.
It's an agreement in principle, if you go. So what we're asking for is that Council gives approval in principle so that Deloitte can actually work through this particular scenario and advise you, as part of its due diligence process, that the cash flows from the water scheme will provide for the cost of that water from year 10 onwards.
Mr. Chairman, we could ask Deloitte to review this proposition without agreeing to it in principle in advance. We could, here's a proposal. Give us your 2 cents on this, Deloitte. We have no view of it at this time.
Yes. This is a question for you as Chairman of the Regional Council. Right at the very beginning, the Ruataniwha water storage scheme was put up as economic advantages, but also hugely environmental advantages to the Tuki. Right from the very beginning, it was sold as from its economic advantages. Do you think, to the public, the public ever understood that they were going to buy water, that the 4 million that we were going to get as part of the consent was not going to be sufficient, and that we were going to have to buy extra water to meet those economic? Because none of the public that I talk to understand that.
Environmental or economic? Environmental. Yeah.
So for the Tuki, for that we always understood that the Tuki was in trouble. This dam was going to help the Tuki get out of trouble.
Started.
And
slightly before my time, but that's my understanding.
And the 4 million. But do you think the public ever understood that we were going to buy extra water and take a risk like this, $35 million?
Or grasp an opportunity like this. This is the way I see this.
But do you think they ever understood that that was part of the deal?
Well, this deal's only just come to the table, as we've heard, in this form.
I've heard that it was been bandied around before, but I don't ever recall it. Myself personally, so I'm speaking as part of the public here.
Only other than a workshop we had on it, Councillor, which you attended and nodded furiously, if I remember.
So 2 weeks ago, but...
It was longer than that. Anyway, look, you asked me a question. This specific conversation hasn't been had.
Excuse me, Chairman, if I might add, though, the terms of the concession deed And the fact that the council would have to pay for the additional 4 million cubic metres has certainly been in the public domain. I have spoken about it on a number of occasions, including at HBRC annual general meetings. Probably didn't speak at it at the last one, but certainly at previous ones and in other public meetings. So it's definitely been in the public domain that the council would have the option to buy, and if it wanted to get the water, that extra 4 million cubic metres, it would have to pay for them.
Councillor Dick, did you have your hand up? No.
Well, I mean, on the issue of consultation and so on, the fact of there being a option to buy and pay for 4 million cubes a year, I can't recall that being part of any specific consultation. And I believe there is a generality of consent around this thing that makes this not only feasible, desirable, but also sanctioned. But if there's any real doubt, then I'm sorry. If there's any real doubt, then maybe a call to audit might not go astray.
What's your
Sorry?
a discussion with the
I don't know
auditor.
why. Is it?
Yeah. Okay. Further questions? Councillor, he said a question.
A call to audit,
A call to the auditor.
audit office.
Yeah, audit office. Councillor Pipe.
The Deloitte's report, when would we be expecting it? Which meeting would we be expecting to get that report back? That's question number one. And I just want clarification on this purchase, the option for that purchase that has been offered to us. You said, Liz said before, that it was not going to be part of the condition precedent for the total sign-up. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay.
None of these amounts that are under discussion today are part of any totalling up towards to meeting that condition precedent.
And the Deloitte's
Deloitte's report will come and either coincide with the financial close. It'll come in the next couple of months.
Chair, point of clarification, it's not an option, it's a commitment. It's not an option. Two councillors here think it's an option. They're wrong.
A what?
It's not an option to purchase. It is a commitment to purchase.
Yeah, it's a contract. Yeah, that's right. Councillor Belvin.
So given that it's a commitment to purchase 35 million or so dollars worth of water, is that a condition that is being placed upon us by any investor we're discussing this with?
Could you rephrase your question, please? Restate your question.
It's been said that this purchase is not a part of meeting the financial close requirement of 45 million or whatever that number turns out to be. But is this arrangement a condition that is being placed upon us by any investor that we're talking with about the project?
No.
Question?
Councillor Barker.
You made the comment before has been made that we would be able to, we bought this, and we would be able to therefore trade in water. We could go to Return for Limited Partnership and talk to them. Other people want it, we would trade in water. The question I have for this discussion is it the core role of this council to be a water trader, or are we a regulator? Because that's what is being proposed here, is that the council become a water trader. That's what's being suggested. I don't see that as part of our role at all.
The council also has a role as an investor and manages an investment portfolio. This is actually part of its, or could be considered as part of its investment brief. I'll leave it at that.
My question, supplementary question, is to the financial person, Paul. If we were to be, this council is to view $35 million spent this way as an investment, as an asset, what is the normal due diligence process we would go through before making such an investment? And how does that compare with what we're proposing here?
Well, certainly the first part of a due diligence process would be to find out whether you could afford to make the payment, okay? And that work has yet to be undertaken. The cash flows are yet to be finalised. I believe they're nearly there. And the peer review that will be carried out, Deloitte will have access to those cash flows. So their comments will be in the nature of, yes, there is cash flows, there is sufficient cash flows. It'll come back to council to make a decision, and the knowledge that there's cash flows to afford it. And that's absolutely essential with investment. If you're going to pay for something, you need to know the money is there to pay for it.
To couch it better though, or not to couch it better, but to understand it better, how many other investments do we add up all the years together and start quoting that as the price? I mean, we talk about year by year, plan by plan. Obviously the calculator's been working here and we've got it in our papers, but we're talking year by year, aren't we? Normally, we don't talk about an asset or an investment over a period of years.
No, we're talking about a yearly commitment, a cash flow to justify it each year, and it extends out beyond that with the cash flows keeping pace with it.
And I repeat, we take our dividend and environmental flow. I'm not sure where the confusion is here, but Mr. Mohi.
Just moving away from the thrust of this debate, regarding the environmental benefits, can you just confirm, Andrew, that indeed the Hatuma section under 8.2 has been discussed and is an ongoing discussion?
Yes, it is. And it's been discussed with the claimant groups, at the Tamatea Taiwhenua and others. And my understanding is that it's considered to be a real benefit in a highly degraded lake or wetland, which is the single largest wetland left in Hawke's Bay.
So supplementary to that, probably Mr. Maxwell, can we do this, can we fix that lake without the water?
You could certainly provide some benefit to the lake, but this benefit comes over and above anything else we could practically do in there, given that it's a large sort of sink. It has limited inflows, suffers from eutrophication, algal blooms. So providing the ability to flush the system in the view of the ecologists is a benefit, and would be something that we couldn't artificially do otherwise.
Is it worth protecting?
Absolutely. The region has very, very few wetlands left in it, and as Andrew pointed out, this is one of the largest. It ranks in the top 10 wetlands that this council investigated some years ago as a priority wetland. Significant habitats for a range of plant, animal and bird species, so absolutely worth protecting.
Supplementary explanation. Just that about a quarter of the lake is owned by DOC, and that is to be returned as part of the treaty claim.
Further questions? I have a mover.
Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to move, but I would actually like to suggest a expanded wording. I have just emailed that through to Ms. Hooper, so I'm not sure whether she can put it up or would you like me just to read it out and see if there's a seconder. Right, 1 as is. 2, when you get to the end of the 10 to 35 years, the addition of over and above the flushing and other flows provided by the resource consent. 3, 3.1 and 3.2 as is, and new 3.3. Confirmation from staff and HBRC that the net position of dividend paid by HBRC less the cost of the HBRC flows will be consistent with the HBRC statement of corporate intent. And 4, by entering into a water users agreement, council notes it will be creating an asset which at any future time it may sell all or any part of the available water.
So is someone happy to second that? Thank you, Councillor Dick. Do you wish to speak?
Mr. Chairman, this isn't in principle. It is actually now being able to put it to the test. And we have discussed these environmental flows for a long time. These are flows over and above what has been provided through the resource consent. So, I mean, this is a matter of years now that we are aware that those flows are there and that they have always been there at a cost to council or any future council. So I guess this is a way of actually, instead of doing it on an ad hoc basis of what will you buy in this particular year, of being able to plan ahead as part of the dividend. And I really would refer to the statement of corporate intent with HBRC, which quite plainly states that where there are environmental benefits, a slower path to financial return may be considered. And so what we're looking at here is a multiple bottom line. We're looking at an environmental and a financial economic bottom line here. We're not just talking about, and through the RWS consent processes, that fixing the tuki it was part of that consent. We're looking at what is happening in the future with climate change, what are the stresses going to be on this river system, how do we actually protect this whole system against all those other stresses that are coming with drier summers, tougher winters, all those sorts of things that climate change is likely to throw at us in the future as well. So it's a case of trying to future-proof the system. It isn't in principle decision, it has to be tested. It does actually have to see that those returns actually justify it, that the combination of that environmental and economic return does meet the requirements that we have under our statement of intent. So it seems to me a very clear way forward of being able to pay for it. And I just actually go back to a meeting that we had in 2014. And I note that it was on the 12th of November 2014, the corporate and strategic meeting, when a notice of motion was put. One of the suggestions was to try and get more environmental benefit for it, but no mechanism was there really for dirt other than just run the water down the middle of the main part of the river. Here we've got a proposal that actually allows us to make a use of the environmental flows to really bring some environmental benefits to areas that are both highly susceptible or of high value, or of, just being able to actually improve some of those, especially those off the main stem river improvements. So given the fact that, yes, it will still be an asset, I doubt very much that I can see a future council actually selling it, because I think the environmental benefits are going to be there even more in the future than they are now as we look at the effect of climate change. So it is a proposal that is worth testing, and this is a chance to be able to test it fully.
Councillor Dick.
I'll reserve speaking.
I'll take an opportunity to speak. This is actually a vote for the river. And I don't know how many times I've heard that round this table. Who votes for the river? Well, it's actually, the time is today. Today is a vote for the river. A vote for a better environment, a vote for Lake Hartuma. And sure, it's got to be tested, it's got to go through a bit more rigour, but this, I'll repeat it, is a vote for the river. Other speakers? Councillor Belford.
This is a bid for financial security on the part of HBRC, masquerading as a environmental proposition. I've always felt that any unnatural interruption of the flow of this river must be done in terms that benefit the environment. We asked, a number of us proposed, a augmentation scheme alternative that would have environmental benefits. That was rejected out of hand. now all of a sudden we have a high-level initial assessment that says, oh, there are plenty of environmental benefits to be reaped here, but we will need to purchase more water to accomplish those. This is, to me, if anything, it vindicates the original concerns here that this dam, first and foremost, needed to be able to demonstrate that it accomplished defined environmental benefits. And what we've been told is our basic environmental benefit of this, for which we are paying a cost in terms of enormous farming intensification, is a flow at the foot of the dam. That's basically what we've been promised here. To me, this is a deal we should not be making without more elaboration, without more explanation as to how this might be the best use of $35 million of foregone revenue. I think the public needs to have a say in this. Otherwise, to me, this looks like this is a Donald Trump deal. It's flashy up front, but just give it a few years and watch for the bankruptcy declarations.
Other speakers, Councillor Barker.
Well, I think there's a couple of things about this. Several things make me very nervous. Firstly, when I hear that the logic of this is simply down to this is a vote for the river, and it's a purely emotional pitch, I get really anxious about that. That's Councillor Graham's line, not mine. I'm going to steal that. The second thing is, when I see that we're actually working out the cost of this on the day on an envelope, I'm even more nervous about it. When I see that the sum of it is $35 million, and there's been no explanation to the public about this directly, I'm even more nervous. And we're being asked to make a decision, approve in principle, which is to make a decision today. This is not a proposed, make a decision today, and we have not had a good, long, robust debate and gone through all the issues. I am very nervous about this. I feel that we're being fitted up here. That's my view. Now, the thing that I come back to is about the environment. Let's remember this. There's several things which have been missing here. Firstly, that this scheme is going to increase the minimum flow in the river above what it currently is. So the minimum flows to the river have been too low, and we're going to establish a new higher minimum flow. The second thing is that this scheme is supposing to give us 4 million cubic metres of flushing flows, which are determined at the time to be sufficient to enhance the quality of the river and do a fine job. It's done. Now, the other thing which is missing in this debate is where this extra water is going to come from. We all know that the Tukituki River has got plenty of water almost all of the year round. The only time it's really in trouble is through the summer, when there's low flows through them and the irrigators are pulling water out of it. That's the time it's in trouble. And we also know that the flows into the dam are going to be ebb and flow, and we predict that in 20 years' time, there will be insufficient water to meet the needs of the irrigators. And so people are going to have to pay in this time for the water, which they can't get. So this is the time when the river's going to be in its greatest trouble. So can anybody show me where in this proposal, in a 1 in 20 year drought, where there is no water, we're going to be able to get our 4 million cubic metres? Because no one else can. We won't. So we'll be paying for 4 million cubic metres of water when the river desperately needs it, and we can't get it. That's the truth of it. And there'll be other occasions when we won't be able to get it too. The other thing which worries me about this is the finances of this dam were supposed to be driven on the back of the agricultural sector. They were going to see sufficient interest in the water. They were going to buy up large. Well, we haven't seen much sign of that. We still haven't got to the minimum levels yet. And we are helped to get there by one, the Central Hawke's Bay Council is going to buy water. We're now asking the Regional Council to buy water. So councils are buying water. It makes this seem to me, I have to say, getting pretty close to a Ponzi scheme. We've got all these little deals going around the place to try and get the figures up. Well, I'm not going to agree to $35 million worth of expenditure put it the other way, a foregoing of $35 million with income without a thorough, rational debate. And you can put all the arguments like about having the environmental dividend, happy with that. But I want to go through all of the numbers, and I'm not going to vote for an agreement in principle on this today on the basis of what I've seen today. We've got numbers being calculated on the back of an envelope. We're putting the council into being a water trader, and we're making long-term commitments which the public haven't had a view in. Nowhere else would we have $35 million worth of foregone expenditure or $35 million worth of investment without having gone to our ratepayer base. Nowhere else. And I do not see why we should do it here.
Other speakers, Councillor Pipe?
I'm going to support this because this particular recommendation talks about Deloitte's coming back with a report, and just the sort of the answers that Councillor Barker was wanting are going to come back in that report. It seems to me that as an environmental situation, I mean, this is a win-win situation. It's a win for the river, and it's a win for those people who are wanting the environmentalists and the farmers who are wanting that river improved. So I'm going to support it.
Thanks, Chair. When I read this paper, I really didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and I had to think about it for a while, and I have no choice but to characterise the proposal in this paper as the dance of the desperates. HBRC had gone into denial about the benefit of us entering into this contract for a significant amount of water, and I accept their statement that it is not any sort of a requirement from the institutional investors they're talking to, but I have absolutely no doubt that it would be seen as a huge benefit by those same people, and certainly would add to their comfort zone in entering into an agreement to co-fund this proposition. So I really only want to make 3 comments about this. The first is that HBRC is our baby, and the regional council's brief in life is to consider the environment, and HBRC as our subsidiary needs to consider the environment as well. So given that there's going to be a significant amount of free spare water not committed in the early years of the life of the dam, why would HBRC hold a gun at our head and say, we're prepared to make some of that water available to you now, but you have to enter into a contract to buy water later? Why wouldn't they just make that water available to us anyway to test environmental flows and find out whether 4 million is the right number, 8 million is the right number, 12 million is the right number? And it may well be in their benefit to do so, because it might be further down the track that the amount of water that we'd like to contract from this dam is more than the 4 million that's being proposed here. So, I mean, we're basically being asked to make a decision here in the absence of any knowledge as to what the right number is. We have the opportunity to test for the right number over several years, and that's exactly what we should be doing. And once we know the answer to the question about improving environmental flows in the river, that's the point in time at which we should be entering into a contract to buy the right amount of water, not a guess today. That makes no sense to me, whatever. So the only other thing I want to say is I can't believe, as responsible councillors, that we would enter into this arrangement without a form of public consultation. And I go back to when we had discussions on the amount of money increase that we gave to Hawke's Bay Tourism as part of our last planning round, where I know a number of councillors sitting around this table had considerable qualms about the fact that our consultation did not include the number that we were proposing to give them. So why would it not be the same here?
Thank you, Chair, pointing to me. It's hard to add to 3 speeches which have gone before me. Hard to top Ponzi scheme or
There's
dance
5 speeches before you.
Yeah, dance of the desperate. My concerns are around those exact ones. That first of all, it's the $35 million contingent liability, which is going onto our balance sheet, and we're not consulting the public. That seems to be quite extraordinary to me and irresponsible. Just to follow up Councillor Bevan's point, I just can't believe we would do that. And to say that we can offset that against dividends, well, everybody knows you can't put dividends expected onto your balance sheet as well, so you can put it on a cash flow, but it's all very speculative and can't be offset. So you just have to say that we have a contingent commitment to $35 million. Whether that's offset against future speculative dividends or not, it's lost income, it's just lost. We're going to have to pay that. The other thing that I would want to say is that the public and me, despite what Councillor Scott alludes to, I thought this water storage scheme was going to fix the issues that we're having in the Toki-Tok. I'm sure that the public think that, and now all of a sudden they're going to find out tomorrow morning that, oh no, that's not the case. You've got to buy more water, and it's at a huge cost. And if you actually work this out, that scheme which we put up as an alternative scheme, that would have done all this, except that got just thrown in the trash pit. And I just find this whole thing quite incredible and quite irresponsible.
Councillor Hewitt.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to Dr. Pearce and Mr. Newman for the opportunity to traverse this. It's been quite a bit of work getting our heads around it as councillors. I know we've workshopped it and a lot more questions. I really welcome the opportunity to hear more from Deloitte and to hear more from the staff on the environmental assessment of environmental benefits that can be developed out of this. I see it as a very exciting opportunity that we can be enhancing Lake Hartuma, one of the most significant wetlands in Hawke's Bay. I think augmenting flows in small streams is tremendous. So while I'm concerned about where we were going to and how this is twisted around from us being an investor to a user as well, I weigh this up and I'm thinking, all right, in 10 years' time we're going to look back and think it is a very solid idea, but at this point in time there is a proposal on the table that we get more information, so I look forward to seeing it. I also look forward to seeing the auditor's opinion, which has been requested as well. So thank you.
You reserved your right, you wish to speak?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to change anyone's mind, so I'll avoid speaking.
Do you wish to sum up?
Mr. Chairman, just a few points made that I do think need to be addressed. Two of the councillors have raised the fact that they had the answer to environmental benefits and these were rejected. I really do need to point out that the answer was just more water straight down the middle of the river. And there was no addressing of any of those spring-fed flows and how that would be. There was no reference to any of the other tributaries, no solutions for that. This, and I want to point out that the public, the statement was made, the public thought this would fix the Toki-Toki. Certainly the resource consents addressed that. And those flows are totally protected through the resource consent process. We're talking here of added benefits. We're talking of being able to enhance some of the degraded areas, such as Lake Hartuma, which is a plus for this scheme. But more than that, we are talking about future-proofing for climate change. And I think it's really important to know that we're looking well into the future of being able to look at providing for environmental benefits over and above this fix-it type of benefit that we were talking about earlier. I really want to address Councillor Bevan's point that maybe we need an awful lot more water, and wouldn't it be nice just to keep trying it out? At the end of the day, we do have a statement of corporate intent that has an economic bottom line. So it has to be balanced against that economic bottom line. If we're looking at both an economic return and an environmental return, and that's what we're asking Deloitte to run the cash flows on, that benefit will be known and that we don't just suddenly say, well, let's throw the whole thing, let's forget all our economic return and go over to nothing but environmental benefits. We're looking for a balanced outcome for the future, which is both economic and environmental. And I just want to pick up one more point, that this is to get this scheme over the line. No, it's not. This doesn't form part of that minimum uptake. So I think that again is misleading. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? And Tom's calling for division, correct? Yeah. Okay, all those in favour? First time this has ever happened, eh, Rex? Yeah. And against? You got the numbers? You got the names? Good girl. Righto. All good.